What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. You are listening to No Set Path. This week's guest is John Mofield. John is a cinematographer and photojournalist based out of Nashville, Tennessee. He's also quite the DIY mechanic and world adventurer. We talk about how he got his start in creative pursuits, moving to New York, moving back home to Nashville, and also how he rehabbed a mid-90s motorcycle and went on a multi-country, multi-continent adventure to the far reaches of the earth. It's quite the adventure, quite the listen. And without further ado, here's John. So we have John Mofield, who's a buddy of mine and a great cinematographer in his own right, with me today on the show. And this is our second attempt at doing this, because the first time we sat down to do this remotely, you were on some border town crossing into or somewhere around Guatemala on your motorcycle trip, which we'll totally talk about. But welcome back to the States, and hopefully a more stable internet connection.
Yeah, it's good to be back. And yeah, hopefully I would say it's definitely a better connection this time.
Yeah, man. So where are you based for those people listening? Where are you talking to us
I'm
from?
talking to you from Nashville, Tennessee, in my home, a new place I just moved into. And I've been back in the country for about a month and a half. But yeah, Nashville, Tennessee, grew up here or outside here and working here currently.
How's the new place?
New place is nice, man. It's nice. It was kind of crazy, as you can expect, getting back, and I didn't even know really what my living situation was going to be when I got back. But I found a sweet spot and got my dog kind of back and situated. It's a good place for him. So it was like a month of just kind of getting set up. But I really like it. I mean, it's got a shop for the car stuff and the motorcycle stuff. I've got a fenced-in yard for my dog, and it's nice. It's like I'm in the city still, but it's in it's a good combo, like space in the city, I guess. Nashville's not a big city, but it's getting harder to find space here. Definitely.
Yeah, man. Last time I was in Nashville, the traffic was no joke.
It's because we haven't, we're still like just around 1 million people here, which is not a huge city, but they just did not plan for what's happening now. So it's just so congested. Yeah, it's bad. But
Yeah. The impetus for this whole show being that we're, talking to creative professionals from all different walks and seeing, getting an inside track to like their story and kind of illustrating that everybody's road into like this creative lifestyle is totally different. You grew up in Nashville, and, tell us a little bit about getting into like film and photography. I mean, I know I said at the beginning you're a cinematographer, but I know you kind of have your hands in a lot of different things. You're one of the more amazing photographers that I know. I'm always happy to tout your photography skills. So tell us how you got started on your like creative journey.
So here. I mean, the beginnings are very similar to most people's, just in, getting a camera at a relatively young age and figuring out, I had an eye or something. But getting kind of beyond that and beyond those beginnings, I think we've heard with a lot of people. Really, I just started, I don't know, I feel like it was the first time I really started to love photography and film when I started to realize how much I liked people. And I would photograph people, and it just started that's what really got me into it, to be honest. Even in the beginnings, whenever I was first taking photos or something, it kind of brought me, it was anybody who, especially any artist who, makes things knows that it's communication. And I think it was my first thing to really communicate to people. So I fell in love with it, and I got into cinematography for a while and started freelancing at a really young age. I moved to New York when I was 20, which is kind of sort of how we got connected in a way, because we had mutual friends in New York.
Yeah, the irony is that we've actually never worked on a job together. And when you were in New York, I didn't actually know you at that point, but we have a few mutual friends. And the only time we've ever actually like hung out in person is in Nashville years ago when I was in town for work. But that's it. I mean, we've all that being said, I think we've done a good job of like
I
staying in
know.
touch.
It's strange that people you stay in touch with over the years, but no, I
Yeah.
think so too. And yeah, but I went up there and I feel like I think that love for people and kind of creating just grew and became what it is now. But yeah, I started freelancing at a relatively young age and kind of have been a freelance, AC cinematographer and now DP for a while. But as we've talked about, I've also dove into lots of other things like photography and now kind of photojournalism in that world, or the art side of that. And yeah.
I think, as someone who spent a decade of their life in New York, I would definitely attest that like it is one of the best places to be, even if you're there temporarily, just to like get exposed to like so many different things and kind of see what calls to you and like what draws you in. And, you being someone who's like really attracted to people as a subject matter, right? That is like the ultimate place, in my opinion, to like, just be confronted with all different walks of life and like this big swath of humanity.
Yeah.
To really help like sort out, you say, okay, well, I'm really into people, like people get my creative juices flowing and like, okay, in what context? And I think being in an environment like that really helps you suss that out. I mean, it did for me. The irony is like, I'm similarly disposed. Like I really dig people, and, on jobs, it's a lot easier because I'm there to like, film people. But on my own time, I'm actually really shy about it. So, like self-motivation to go out and like, set up my own shoots with strangers is like, oh,
Well,
it's terrifying.
I find that when you make things, you kind of are constantly playing these characters. When you're on a job, you have a very clear like character and a role to play, and you step, especially when you're a freelancer, because you're so many different roles and things, like you just step into that role. And I found on passion projects or doing it yourself or just doing it in everyday life, there's no character to play. You just are you, and things end up becoming sometimes a little. The interaction is different, I guess. But as far as what you're saying about New York, I 100% agree. I think I wasn't there that long, but there's something about that place that I always tell people, like, I didn't even make that much of my own stuff when I was there. I was ACing a lot, I was firsting a lot, and meeting all these people. But I think what I really got to do on a film side is I got to see like great work. I got to see it, and I feel like as a young artist, it's invaluable. Like being able to see really like talented people doing their thing and be exposed to that, and as a visual artist, being exposed to those images. And it's not just, seeing the good work. It was more than that. It's like you get to be in a place where all this culture kind of like, overflows into the work. And when I got to see that, it was something like I'd never seen before. And I always tell people, like, I felt like I didn't belong there in certain ways, and I still don't in certain ways. But when I got back, I feel like all this stuff I got from New York, or when I left New York, it like came with me. All of these, all those experiences, and kind of it really changed the trajectory. It changed the trajectory of my life in a really like a way that I didn't expect, I guess. Because I never considered myself an artist. I was, how film can kind of share those. It's like an industry and a job, but
there's a crossover. There's an intersection of a lot of different things. I mean, it's a mix of people who consider themselves technicians, people who consider themselves artists. There's a lot that goes into that one industry. So yeah.
I never really considered myself that. I like made this stuff and I wanted to be good at doing it. But when I came back, there was kind of a shift, and I felt more like an artist, and I felt like telling more challenging stories, or trying to challenge the way that I was making things, and it just shifted everything. And then I don't think I would be open to have taken so many different paths in art, whether it be photography, if it wasn't for my time in New York and being exposed to, great photographers and great cinematographers, and also just like people. There's in all of humanity squeezed into like a little dot.
Yeah, it's a really challenging place. I mean, obviously you know this, but for those who aren't familiar with New York City, it's a really challenging place um, in myriad ways. Just from like living conditions. I feel like I was one of those people that I never really had a ton of money. So if you don't really have a ton of money, living can be challenging. Like just kind of the environments that you wind up in. Um, you know, sense of belonging, like you mentioned, is tricky. It's like we all kind of find our people, but I think very few people ever feel like they truly belong there, except for maybe my sister. I think she's going to be a lifer, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but it is a really good place to kind of sort out a different part of yourself, and that's cool. That like on the other side of living in a place like New York, that's so, and this is just my opinion, it's so business driven, at least nowadays. I mean, I know like obviously there's a vibrant music scene and art scene and all that stuff, but like my whole exposure to it's like everything is like business and a hustle and making money and blah blah blah. And I think that's part of just the freelance condition, right? But it's cool that on the other side of your time there, you left there being like, no, 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 I feel like an artist, and I feel like you definitely carry yourself that way. Um, you know, I I peg you as a cinematographer because that's how I know you. That's like the work of yours that like I was first familiar with. But you just you're one of those people I know that just seems to kind of march to the beat of their own drum and just kind of rides the wind a little bit. And I mean that in a
Oh no,
positive way. I don't mean
I
that
got you.
like you know, um, so one thing I want to get to is your motorcycle trip. We're going to table that for just a second, but because I think that kind of epitomizes all of this like artistic journey stuff that you've like discovered about yourself. But like post New York, you move back home to Nashville. What does life look like when you get back home? Like, did you move back in with your folks? Is that not a thing? Did you get your own place? Like, what does post New York life look like for someone who's now had this like creative epiphany and like has to make ends meet, but also wants to create? Like, what does that look
Right.
like?
It was I mean, there were a few sides to that. So when I moved back, I was dating a girl in Brooklyn, and she moved to Nashville too. So we ended up moving into I had a transition like month, at my parents' house, but we moved into a place in the south side of Nashville, and we're dating for a bit. But as far as me, and me kind of entering in that artist part of my life, I feel like when I got back, I was I was diving into fulfilling a lot of sides of myself I didn't get to in New York. A lot of the car sides and the mechanically savvy sides of myself, and that I couldn't do in New York or wasn't doing. But as I got back, I was doing freelance jobs with some clients in New York still, and bouncing back and forth. Me and James were working together still, and I had a friend here who owned a small production company, and we were kind of getting it off the ground here. So I really wasn't. I don't think I ever would have left New York if I didn't have a plan to start creating like the second I got off, and I did. But I will say that New York, and this is one of, I think, the negatives that I still hold with it, and it's still kind of something that lingers. I feel like anyone who's lived there, it does, is that when I got back, it has that kind of a psychological hold on you. It's like you do this thing. It's so hard to be there, especially as a young person with like no money. It was so hard, and I did it. I was there for a while. I got through the sludge that's the hardest in there, where I like built freelance contacts and started working and stuff. And I felt like when I was back in New York, I definitely there was a big transition period where I was kind of building my worth back up, at least how I saw my work and stuff, and my work detached from that city. and myself as an artist detached from that city. And I feel like there was this epiphany coming back as like, I felt like an artist, but I think I found that in this like rebuilding of myself when I got back that I didn't expect I was going to have to do. So I got back and I was like, I realized that like I kind of felt when I got to New York that I was, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Or like, I felt like I was a successful, early 20 somethings doing what I, dreamed to do. And when I got back and continued to do that here, it was kind of a wrestle with my identity and who I was. And I think the artist kind of came out of that identity struggle, I guess.
Yeah, man. I think it's part of the plight of being a creative person in general, and someone who's artistically inclined, that you're always, I mean, I'm at least this way. Like I'm always, I guess like second guessing myself is the way to say it. It's like, I'm always asking like, am I doing the right thing? Even if I'm good at something, like I'm good at cinematography. Like I've built a career out of it. I've been able to buy a house out of it. Like it's a real thing, but still I'm just like, is this the right thing? Like I'm just going job to job. Like, there's a lot of questioning that happens, right? I think that's the best way to summarize it. And probably one of those themes that's going to like keep coming up as I talk to more people, I would assume, is like, everything always feels so open-ended, and I always feel like I'm always climbing some like endless ladder. Like I'll get to one goal and then I just like scoot right past that, and there's something else on the horizon that I really want to achieve. And not for everybody. I think for me in particular, I think like there's a hefty amount of like self-doubt. And I think that comes with just being an artist. Like, I've talked to plenty of people, or like you see a million memes on the internet or whatever. And I think everybody who's in our boat as a creative is just like, kind of like fighting the good fight every day of like, have I made it? Have I not? Am I doing the right thing? Am I not? It's super interesting. So, this is a really long-winded way to say it's like, it's kind of really poetic and great that you were kind of like forced into this like rebuild when you got back home, like back to your roots. Because the New York thing is like, it's hard to let go of. It's very intoxicating in a lot of ways. It's just like, just when you think you're out, brings you back in.
It totally does. I mean, I've almost gone back like a couple times, a few times. And to be honest, if it wasn't for COVID, I would be back right now. I like had a place in New York and everything. And then COVID happened and, stayed put for a while, and here I am. But and it's one of those places where I tell everyone, it's like, on the bad days, it's the worst place on the planet, and I never want to go back. And on the good days, it's euphoric and it's the best. So it's people ask, will you go back? I was like, I don't know, maybe. There's like an equal chance I will and won't.
Well, but also I think, it depends on where you're at in your life. It's like you're a good bit younger than I am. So, I mean, you have plenty of time. And I think that's not having a completely finite outlook is great. Is great. Especially for people like you who are, always looking to find the next thing that like motivates their art, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is a really relevant conversation for me now too, especially now, rather than when we first did this podcast when I was on the road, because I can't remember if I told you on the road, but I teach part-time at a university.
Yeah.
So I teach part-time at a university just like 2 days a week. And it's really, the pay's so bad, as most people know with teachers, that it's like volunteering. I really enjoy doing it. They remind me of myself, 11 years ago or something. And,
sure.
But, and it's really nice to like give, but they offered me a full-time like gig, and I'm still freelancing, so I'm enjoying growing. And I, like you said, I'm still young, I got a lot of rambling to do when it comes to creating. And And not that there's anything wrong with teaching full time, and it's definitely something, it's still something I think about, but it's like, for me, I think that this whole, uh, yeah, this whole balance of knowing that, like, you're doing something now, and that's okay. Like, you can do something now, and then it doesn't mean nothing is like final, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, if you did start teaching, or if I didn't start teaching, it doesn't mean either or is like this final decision, for the rest of your life, I guess.
Yeah. I think all this stuff is really like right on the money for hopefully the people listening, right? It's like the whole idea is that everybody's road is different. And there's so many people that I know who, I'll say it a different way. I made the switch into filmmaking at 30, which is late. So most of the people that I work with are like, who are my contemporaries, are a lot younger. And I know plenty of people who are like, since the day they were 18, they're like, I want to work in film, or I want to do this, I want to do this. And they just go for it. And like, more power to them. Like, that's great, but that's not the case for everybody. And, hopefully this is speaking to somebody out there in the audience, even if it's just one or two people who are maybe wrestling with like, what direction should they go in? Like, what should they be doing? And I think, you are a great example of like just going with the flow, so to speak, and like making lemonade out of lemons when you can. And like, even to the point of teaching, it's like, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you feel like there's a part of you that wants to like give your experience back. And that's super cool. That's great. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that, and it goes back to kind of the conversation we had when I was in Guatemala about like, that I think this stuff, the seasons, and also just kind of being able to explore these different things, and knowing that things happen at different times for people, it allowed me seeing things in that way, and seeing things in a way that's kind of like, that you don't have to be locked in one season or one thing all the time. You can let your interests and who you are kind of ebb and flow, and you don't have to like jam pack yourself into being one thing all the time. As much as, there are times where I'm like, oh, if I just did, only quadrupled down on cinematography all the time, and like got rid of everything I had, and, tunnel visioned on it, and, oh, where would I be, or something like that. But I think that a lot of times we are a lot more than one job title. And if you're an artist, it's like, you're a lot more than the medium that a lot of people know you for. And if you sit there and tell yourself so much that, because that's how I was when I was young, I was like, I'm going to be a DP. I'm going to be a DP, like over and over and over. And that was it. And then the second I was able to not let go of that, but just like release my grip a little bit, I veered into these other realms. And I feel like, a very rounded person because of that, or I felt free, I guess, to move about.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off because the audio dipped out for a second, but this is interesting. And this is really more for me, right? I'm so curious. And if you don't have like a good answer for it, that's totally fine. I'm one of those people that has a hard time releasing my grip on stuff. And I think that's really like to my own detriment. I think there's a lot of times that the days would be a little bit easier if I was able to just like relinquish a little bit of control, or accept that like, not everything is going to go according to plan. I'm also a Virgo, so I have a really hard time with that. Which is, if anybody out there is into astrology, like when plans change, Virgos don't do so well with that. Anyway.
When you're in the film industry? Oof.
Yeah, I know. So I guess my question, or to tee it up, is like, was there anything special that you had to do, or like, how were you able to kind of like let go of some of that control, or just like loosen your grip and like let other things in to your sphere?
I would say, I would say, so one thing that really changed, and I'll try not to get too on a tangent, but one thing that helped me let go is I was kind of in a rut creatively. This was a while ago. This was end of 2017, beginning of 2018. I'd been in
Mm-hmm.
back in Nashville for a short time, about a year and a half or year. So it was 2018. Anyways, I really like needed to do a passion project. I was working on, kind of stuff I didn't want to be, and I was at the. I think every freelancer, especially, has been to a place where you feel like you're doing work and you feel like you're better than you are, but you don't have the work to show for it. So it's like so it just like
100%.
exists in your head, and I had like I was like, why do I think that? If I don't have the work, then I'm not that good, but I think that I am. So I just needed a project for myself to do it, and I did it. And it was a documentary on this guy. It was my first real taste of like real documentary where I got to go in thinking it was going to be one story and it ended up changing and becoming something totally much bigger than myself or anything. And it was this guy that was a Renaissance man. I'm not going to get too much into him, but he's like this Renaissance man. That's why I wanted to do a doc on him. He was interesting. He raced rally cars. He did, all this stuff. And upon the first interview, I realized he just had a beautiful philosophy on life and how to live it. And the way, and it wasn't even like his like a lesson he was teaching. He just did it through example, how he lived his life. And for me at that point in my life, I was still very much like DP. I'm going to be a DP. That's still what I'm doing. But this guy, he was unbelievable. Like he raced like rally cars with his wife Doris in the 70s. He is a painter. He was a radio host for a while. He's a pilot. He does all these things, and he just lives life so beautifully. And everyone, just the way they speak about him is just like, hold on, that was me. Just the way, and he lives life so beautifully, and just the way that people speak about him is, I don't know. It's he just leaves this impression on everyone, right? And eventually, but one big thing, and I noticed that, and I noticed how much I looked up to that. And then eventually I was like, once I started to get, it was like a year of making this thing and on and off. And once I started to get a more rounded picture of this guy, he was so smart and had this lust for knowledge and life. But he was also, he had all of that, but he had this humbling, like, outlook that if he lost all of it or most of it or wasn't able to achieve most of it, what he had right there, what he had gained up to that point was enough. So it's like contentment, but not, it's like shaves the fat of the negative side of contentment sort of, and then allowed him to continue and grow even as an old man, and I saw that and I was like, I saw all this amazing stuff with this guy, and he was a farmer. He did all this stuff, but his job and like what he did, he was a farmer. And I would never classify this guy as that, and it really, it highlighted the type of people I like to document too, which is, is your everyday person. And when you dig into them a little bit more, you find that, they're much larger than their job or whatever problem they have. And, everyone is. And I think that for me, I saw that and I was like, I care about my job and I care about cinematography and I want to be the best I can be. I was like, but I was starting to feel, I think I had like a little nudge that there are more things that I need to be doing or want to be doing. And that I think really opened a door for me to maybe courage is the right word. It gave me the courage to relinquish that grip so much on what I had to be. And it was scary, but I think I'm a better person for it. And I'm still just so excited for all these. I mean, the project that came from the trip it changed so much even from when we last talked, and it's going to be like a new endeavor. I think it's a new type of art that I haven't really done before, and I'm excited.
Well, so let's get into it in this way. Like, that's really, like, I think that's really poignant and beautiful that like this like shift in your mentality, right? This like this release you were able to have came out of you doing a personal project, you doing what it is you want to be doing, or at least one of the things you want to be doing, and discovering that, yeah, everybody has a story. Like everybody's got something. And this one person's story, coming off that project, you got really inspired to kind of look at life a little bit differently, which is great. So, along with other things, one of the different things that you're the only person I know that has done this, and I still am super impressed that you did it. You went on a motorcycle trip, and this isn't like a drive across the US motorcycle trip. This is like one of the most epic motorcycle trips you could possibly take, on an old bike that you restored yourself. So like, just give us like the play by play. What trip did you go on? How did you go on it? Tell us what happened along the way. Just let it all out.
So yeah, last summer I prepped for about 6 months, but I rode a mid 90s KLR 650, like a big dirt bike. I rode it from Nashville, Tennessee to Ushuaia, Argentina, which is the southernmost city on planet Earth. So it's about 400 miles from Antarctica. And it's so from Nashville to Ushuaia, it was about 15,000 miles. And then round trip with kind of a couple plane skips on the way back, it was 18,000 total.
Unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, the first time we tried, like I mentioned at the beginning, the first time we tried to do this podcast with really, really poor internet, you were somewhere in like the central South America, like somewhere around there.
I was at at a border city entering Guatemala.
So like, did you just wake up one day and say, oh, this is what I'm going to do? I mean, obviously not wake up and walk out the door that day, but like, how did you even get this idea?
So I, a few years prior, this is actually right after I finished Rally George, and solidified some of those, new ideologies. I took a cross country motorcycle trip on the Transamerica Trail, which was like it was a 90% or 80% dirt road that goes across the United States. And I did that, and I feel like it was like ripping off a Band-Aid. I was really nervous about it. And it's funny, I finished the trip and I had all these family members and people be like, wow, what an experience. What a once in a lifetime experience. And I kept thinking, and I was like, it doesn't feel once in a lifetime. It kind of feels like just the beginning of something. I got back and I felt like, man, I could do longer. It was a month and a half or 2 months and people were freaking out. I was like, I could definitely do longer on it. And I knew I'd done so much research even before then on moto travel and stuff. I watched Ewan McGregor's stuff. And so I knew the big one. The big one is Ushuaia. That's like what everyone, Alaska to Argentina is the big one. And I wasn't going to do it from Alaska, but I was like, man, that's the one, that's the big one. So I kind of thought of, as most people do with giant trips, I like on and off, thought about it and debated it. Maybe I'll do it this time. No. And then late 2021, I had a conversation with somebody about that first trip. And I was just talking about it, and I'd worn these stories out at this point, and I was talking about it, and they were like, well, what's something you learned on the trip? And I said, oh, well, that's a good question. So basically, I think one of the biggest things I learned is that I always wanted the right amount of money, and I wanted the right amount of time, and I wanted that for years. And then finally, I just pulled the trigger, and 2 weeks later, I went, and I didn't have enough money or time. And I realized about a weekend that I never would have went. Like, it had nothing to do with either of those things. It was just like I never would have been the right time. You just have to feel it.
That's with most big things in life. The circumstances
never
are
right.
Never perfect, and you just got to dive in with both. I mean, that's what we went through with having a kid, man.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a totally different thing, but the sentiment's the same. It's like You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to have enough time, but you got to shit or get off the
Exactly.
pot, basically.
And you figure it out. And that's what, so I'm preaching this, right? And then they were like, oh, wow, that's really cool. So what's next? And I was like, well, I really want to do Argentina, but I really want to spend a year learning Spanish, and I really need a lot more money. And then I was literally just regurgitating back what I said, like, don't do. And I listened to myself do that. And then I thought about it for a while, and I was like, you know what? I had a really good year freelancing that year. And I was like, I have the money, I think. I thought. Now on the post end, I definitely did not have the money. It is expensive, but like I thought I had the money, and I felt mentally in the same place I was before I made Rally George. I was in this place where I felt like I needed to make something new, and it needed to be big for me, and it needed to be like really personal for me. And I knew I wanted to do this trip, and the last few years I've been working in photojournalism a little bit, and then I've also been doing a lot of cinematic documentary work in the photojournalism world with a photojournalist here in town that was a creative partner for a little bit. But I got very in that world, and I was like, I kind of want to do something more along that line, or some kind of medium blending project, as I do it. So yeah, it kind of formed that way. And then I just classic New Year's, I was like, I'm going to decide, on New Year's. And I did in 6 months of prep, and then I left in July.
And how long did the trip take you? Or how long did the trip out to Ushuaia take you?
So to Ushuaia was about 5.5 months.
5.5 months? What? That's wild. I feel like it wasn't that long. Like, as I was following along when you would post stuff, wow, that's wild. That's crazy. And what did that, I mean, it's a really loaded question, because I was just going to ask you, what did that do to you as a person? I'm sure, like, did so many things. Last time we talked about it, you were really inspired by this book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Did I get this right?
Yeah, that was, that was a big inspiration for my first, so that cross-country trip. And I think the philosophy from it is still always a big inspiration. But like, I think that it was a big inspiration for me because I read it, and for the first, we've talked about it a lot. I've always been into cars, like since I was a kid, before art or any of it. Like I avidly keep my hands in some kind of automotive project, and motorcycles as well. And this book was the first time I ever read anything that was kind of a combination of those two things. It was like very deep, like artistic views on the world and life, but it was all from the perspective of this motorcycle trip and like maintaining this motorcycle. So it was this kind of like combination of humanity and philosophy and mechanics. And I don't know. And it was all about, I don't know what it was exactly that really attracted me to it, but I know that moto travel was that. It was just this combination of this like very, philosophical, like observer kind of absorbing the world and culture and in some way, and then also having the knowledge and the, I guess, the physical meditation of working on a bike and keeping it alive, like having this thing that's moving you forward and keeping that thing alive. And for me, I saw that and I was very attractive. And then I was also like, I have a skill that I can get that philosophy and I can reflect it back to the world. I can make something from it. It's not just something that I would get a new worldview. I can give that new worldview to the world, and which wasn't the point of these projects, but and is not the point. But I think what it did is it gave me this new purpose to use skills that I've built over the last, decade and a half of my life, which is the mechanical skills, and then the passion behind that, and then also photography and visual arts.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and kind of in my own mind it's very romanticized just because I was from the outside looking in. But you have this machine that's taking you to the southernmost like inhabited point on the planet, that you're just out in the element, right? You're not protected by a car and a windshield. Like if it's raining, you're in the rain. If it's windy, you're in the wind. And I feel like in my mind, there seems to be so much more of a connection
Yeah.
with yourself and with nature and with the world that way. Um, and not only are you like maintaining this machine, but it's wearing it's picking up the miles of the road. And to kind of segue this into the photo side of things, I know when you like in the early days, one of the more poignant photos I saw was you were stuck in some like downpour and you're underneath a highway overpass with like there's some other guy on the other side of the highway and he's pulled over, same deal.
Going the opposite direction.
And there's just this, yeah, opposite direction. And there's this, I think there's like a car, like a blurry car moving through the frame. And it's just like this moment in time where it's like, I know what it feels like to be stuck out in the rain, but like on a bike where it's just like you have to wait for it to pass until you can keep going. And then as the trip continued, like I think some of the most amazing photos, my favorites from what you shared so far on Instagram or otherwise, was watching how your license plate just deteriorated over time. And I think by the end, you just had handwritten in with marker like what the license plate number was.
I found a piece of wood.
On like a piece of wood or like something. I don't know. But it was just like to watch kind of that degradation over time. It really just like was a smack in the face. Like, holy shit. Like this is real. Like this isn't like hop on a plane and get off on the other side. This is like really like grinding to like get to the other side of this journey that you were on. I think so
the
cool.
bike at the end too was like, it's alive still. And it's back here with me. I shipped it back here with me. Yeah.
No
but
way.
it was struggling. Not struggling and running, but man, the oil, I was finding new leaks like every day. And I was having to, the chain was stretching so much that every single day I had to loosen the axle and change the tension because I'm lucky that I didn't throw that chain off before I got back. And typically a chain you put 30,000 miles on. And I put that chain on right before I left and it was like about to be done.
Unbelievable.
It was wild. But yeah, the license plate, it slowly got, beat up. It really in the off-road sections, it really got beat up because your suspension compresses and it'll like nick the back of your tire or a rock or rocks will hit it. But once I got in Patagonia, the winds in Patagonia are, moto travelers sometimes will, I read all the forums and sometimes they exaggerate things where they have like, oh, be careful here, or be careful there, watch out, the weather's crazy here and the roads are really bad here. And more times than not, I'm like, it's not.
Yeah, everybody's definition of like terrible is like drastically
and for me,
different.
it's like, I think as far when they warn me about the dangerous areas, like I because I spent time in Haiti, I feel like a lot of those it wasn't like that as bad, but that's more of a me thing. I think with the weather and the roads, it's like, I think people just like, they do something dangerous. They like the drama of it. They're like, they like to really be storytellers and exaggerate some stuff. But I will tell you that the wind was no exaggeration. It ripped my license plate like paper. And when I was riding at like a 45-degree angle and going straight. And the wind would just you'd be riding into it. And then it would just change directions, the different directions. So I'd be going around a corner and then my wheel would just get blown the other way, like I would just get blown the other way. And your face is getting pushed so hard by this wind. And it's not just like one gust. It's like somebody's grabbing your helmet and like yanking you like while you're riding. It's the wildest thing I've ever experienced weather-wise, I think. It's insane. I bet I don't really know wind speeds very well, but I bet you it was like, I mean, there were 60-mile-an-hour winds or 80 miles an hour winds, probably. You know, it was wild. I couldn't park the bike, and unless I couldn't stop the bike, like even with me on it, I couldn't stop it unless I was in like a ravine, because the wind was so strong it would blow me over. The only thing that was keeping the bike upright was centrifugal force, was like moving, which is why like I couldn't stop. So if I would have gotten a flat tire, it would have just blown me right over. And to be honest with you, looking back now, even though I was just trying to keep those thoughts out of my head when I was riding, but like I have no idea what I would have done if I got blown over in those like really windy sections. I probably would have had to like, to be honest, I don't know. I would have had to like try to like put something in front of me to block the wind, or I don't know, like a
yeah, but you know what?
Trash.
I mean, that's
trash in front of me or something. I don't know.
You like, you would just have to figure it out in the moment, but also it's like the naivete that like keeps you going, you know? It's like you like voluntarily like block those thoughts out of your head because there is no plan. So you just
I feel like that
forward.
is a lot of the ability to do this stuff. It's funny that we're doing this recording today, because last night, a production company here that I work with a lot, they have a podcast, and they had me talk a little bit about the trip on their podcast. And I was talking about it, and one of them said they were like, I have no mechanical knowledge, and I don't know what I would do in these positions. And I was like, man, I do have mechanical knowledge, and yes, it did help me. I was like, but a lot of times I have no idea like what I'm doing. And if a problem happens, I'm lucky if it's something I've done before, you know, where I know it. A lot of times I'm like, I've never done this, and I'm definitely not qualified, but I'm here alone in the middle of the desert. I'm just going to do it.
I mean, I hope you realize, and I hope people listening realize, that you're literally creating like the perfect metaphor for like what our life is, you know, as like in the path that we have chosen. It's like, there's no plan, you know, you hope maybe you've done something before, but probably not. And you have to figure it out as you go. And it's like, you went on this huge journey, and I didn't think about it the first time we talked about it, I think. And now it's kind of hitting me. It's like, oh yeah, it's like this perfect metaphor for the weird like life path that we've taken, this like journey we've wound up on. That's so wild. So, okay, you made it. You didn't blow over in Patagonia. You made it to Ushuaia. And do you just fly home?
Yeah.
Like ship the bike.
So basically,
and flew home?
I went to Ushuaia. You can't ship the bike from Ushuaia. It's very expensive. Ushuaia is very remote. It's very remote. Like you go through, you know, hundreds and hundreds of miles of nothing to get there. So it's easier to access by a ship than it is by land.
Sure.
But so what I had to do basically is I had to work with a company who could get my bike shipped really easier, and they were in Buenos Aires. So I rode back to Buenos Aires.
Okay.
So that was about 2,600 miles north.
That's like nothing.
It took me roughly like 5 days.
Yeah.
But
that's
and
cool.
the first 3 were like in the hard part of Patagonia, so it was gnarly. But it and I arrived. Oh gosh, this is something I'm gonna be an old man like kicking myself for. But so, when I decided to head north again, I was like, you know what? I made better time than I thought, because the whole time I was heading south, I didn't really know how much time it would take to get there. So I was constantly just like, I got to keep moving because I want to make it. And really my cap for me was January. I had to be back by January. So I didn't want to like not make it, you know. But once I made it, I was like, you know what? With this time, I don't want to rush it, but you know, I was running out of money, and I was also like, it'd be nice to like surprise my family for Christmas, you know, or something. So I ended up planning that, right? And the plan was to get a plane and fly out of Buenos Aires and land here like 3 days before Christmas or something. And as I was writing up, I was like, I'll just look for a plane ticket. And I looked for plane tickets every night when I'd like go to sleep, and they were like $3,000, some $4,000.
Oof.
I know. I was like, what is going on? I can't afford this. I was like, I'm gonna have to wait until February to go home because I can't afford any of these tickets. And I keep trying to look, and it's crazy. Like even $1,700 was too much for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking. And then one day I find one for $700. And
Okay.
it left at like 1 a.m. or something. I was like, oh, so it's like some weird flight on a shitty airline at 1 a.m. I was like, I get it. Well, I was like, buy, not going to find another one cheaper. So I do it, right? And I start moving it forward, and then I get to Buenos Aires, and a lot of interesting stuff happened in between now and then. But I'm in Buenos Aires, and I'm getting, closer and closer to leaving. And then I start watching the World Cup. And I have been watching the World Cup because you can't be in Argentina and not. You're like, every gas station is like closed down. Everyone's washing. And I'm in Argentina, Buenos Aires, and everyone was like, if they beat France, or if France wins, or if they beat, I can't remember who they had to beat to get in with France in the World Cup with France, but they're like, if they win, they're going to play on the 18th. The 18th was my ticket, 1 a.m. on the 18th. So I was on a plane during the greatest soccer game in the history of mankind in Argentina, the city that won, with Messi, like literally a once in a lifetime experience. Truly once in a lifetime. I was on a plane watching it from like a little headrest. I photographed it, the headrest.
Hey, there you go.
But yeah, it was, that was.
Well, I mean, you win some, you lose some, John.
That's true. I mean, I didn't regret it. But it was one of those ones where it's like, I'm not a soccer guy, but holy cow, that experience.
Yeah. Well, so you said you photographed it. So, one thing we haven't touched on is like the project around this trip, and you said it changed. So I want to know how it changed, because, you have this really great way of, or at least from what I've seen, and I actually need to talk you into like selling me a book or something, because you have this really great way of like combining beautiful imagery with like written words, and you've done that before, and you've published previous stuff. All the photos of yours that I've seen, like you're a black and white guy, it's all really, really lovely, and it tells a story. I guess my question is, what photo project or what creative project did you set out to create when you began this, and what has it evolved into now at this point?
Well, originally, before I left, I didn't know if it was going to be video or, I brought video stuff. I brought a drone, and I shed my kit a lot for weight, but and I remember when we talked, in Mexico, I had shifted into being like, I'm just doing a photo and writing project. That's what this is going to be. Yeah. And we started talking after that. So I was just in that shift whenever we did our podcast. And I think it started out as I didn't know. I was just going to kind of be ready to ebb and flow. But I think what I figured out very early on is that I started to be, I was kind of, I stumbled upon these interactions that I had like a choice in them, a clear choice on how I was going to capture them, right? And I think in the beginning in Baja, I did a short doc, or like an actual doc on this old man in Loreto, and it didn't work. It did work in a sense, but I feel like there was something I could have gotten more if I didn't have the video camera in front of me. It's like when you shoot video, you can do an intimate documentary, but in the way that I wanted to capture people, I think it wasn't going to work. It was like watching people through a pane of glass. And the second I switched to only photo and writing, it just got better and better. And what it ended up becoming is an extension, sort of like a changed extension of the project I did when I went cross country in America, which was autographs. And I had an old book and I had people sign it and I took their portrait. And in this one, I had this like leather bound book that I was writing in, and I would have people sign the book. And then I would also write in between pages, and then I would photograph them. And I ended up getting so many signatures in this book. It was like somebody gave it to me. It was like a handmade leather bound book. And I photographed the book too. So its look was kind of important for the project. And I filled it up. And somewhere in Ecuador, I was looking for a new book because it was filled up. I was like, I want someone that embodies this one. And I ended up not finding one. So I just made one myself. And I found a local leather shop and they cut the leather for me and I photographed them and the leather makers in the book. I found an art shop and I cut the paper myself. I folded it myself. I bound it with the leather and I built another book, which is the project. And it was just this amazing like meta, thing where I was able to build a book and then that book was the project, but I got to photograph the process and the people involved in building that second book. And so it became this like, it became the way, I think the moment I decided I was going to continue this autographs project was in America. There was this old man in Needles, California, and not that old, but like pretty old. And he ran this food mart. And I didn't know at all what the project was going to be at this point. Like I was just taking photos and I was just walking and I had my book that I was going to just write in. And there was crazy storms and it was like an awful day, like horrible storms. The hurricane was blowing into the Midwest. And I was like taking shelter under this guy's food mart, like under his little awning. And I asked him if I could. He said, yeah. And it was like dead, nobody around, desert and storming, which was odd in the desert. But I talked to him for a little bit and then I was like, do you mind if I photograph you? And he was like, kind of, like a lot of people are like, really, me? And I was like, yeah. He's like, sure. So I took some photos and then for a moment I was like, because I did the cross country trip and I had people sign the book and I remember what it was like when they would sign it. And I was like, do you want to sign my book? And then he just like looked at me. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I'm a photojournalist and I'm traveling and I'm, having people sign this book and you'll be one of the first people like, for this project, do you want to sign it? And there's something about this guy that just shifted. And he looked at me in this way that was like, he didn't say much about it, but he looked at me and he just like, he said that like, because it was on I-40, which is near Route 66, he was basically like, I get so many motorcycle travelers going through here. And I get so many people going through here and they always get gas here. And he's like, I don't think anybody's ever stayed here this long. He's like, maybe that's because of the storm. He was like, but I've definitely never signed anything for anyone. And he was like, yeah, I'll sign your book. And I sat with him in his little dingy food mart and he had to have two glasses, one to like bifocals sort of, and he like would have them on the end of his nose and he, at his register, he just like signed the book. And there was something about the way people change. Not all of them. Some people, don't want anything to do with you, but like,
sure.
But when you ask somebody to sign something, it's this physical, like intimate thing. And a lot of people in this split second, they're like, this is important. Maybe it's small. Maybe this guy will never make anything. But right now, what I'm doing feels important. And they do it and they write it. And a lot of times they don't really write anything. It's not really necessarily about what they write. It's about like this physical connection to them and their handwriting. Yeah. And so I loved that and I continued it and I did it all the way through. I mean, most of it's in Spanish, obviously.
But that's great.
No, it was just so rewarding. And I feel like it became my writing is a much bigger part of this one where it wasn't as much in the last one. So it's my writing. It's like just this connection of humanity or this reflection of humanity through handwriting and images. And I think that for me, the original idea came from actually a talk about religion. I'm not the most religious person, but which is not common in the South. But I'm not. But I noticed as I got older and as I became more of a developed artist, I started to notice these like things, like these similarities between artists. Maybe like, I work closely with the composer here, and like anything that is like a passion project of mine, we always work together. When you work really closely, as you definitely know, like with someone, if they're in a different medium or something, you start to see similarities, in
Yeah.
they see the world, and they're reflecting human relationships and emotions in their medium, and you do in yours, and you're kind of doing the same things and using different tools, right? And I started to notice that, and I think it got to this point where I was reading, and this was a big part of the last project. It's funny how it all kind of ties together, but the song "The Open Road," the poem by Walt Whitman. When I first, it's cliche because it's about travel, but it's one of my favorites. And when I first read it, I felt like I had heard it before. I felt like I had read that poem already, and I hadn't. I know I had never have. And then I thought about it for a long time, and I thought about this stuff about other artists and how we all sort of dip into the same pool. And it became this thing where I was like, what if this poem existed before Walt wrote it? What if it was something that like it was so like human and so part of all of us that it was already there, and he was like a conduit to kind of, bring it out. And it got me thinking a lot about, and I thought about that, and it got me thinking a lot about that. And I sort of ended up seeing it sort of as this consciousness, like it's this thing outside of us, but it also is us. And it has to do with our emotions and our relationships and how we all share these similar things, because we all experience life in slightly similar ways because we have a limited range of what we can feel. And the more I kind of saw it as a consciousness, that there was a religiosity to it, sort of. And for me, that was a strange thought because I'm not that religious. So for me, I feel like with this project, I was like, I have the ability to go through so many different types of people and so many cultures and do it in this intimate way on this motorcycle. I was like, I want to be able to reflect this consciousness in some way. I want to be able to dip my toe in and use, this way, this thing, the photography, to do that. And there's a poem that I wrote far before this trip, but it's going to be a big part of this project, in the writing. And I wrote it in on the back end of a long period of self-doubt in my art and my career and all of it. And I was on my way to Haiti when I wrote it. And it was this very like, I was seeing the point of like why I was doing it, what I was doing, and of my career choice and all of this stuff, right after a long section where I didn't see the point, and I didn't feel like it mattered, the things I was making. And what I wrote was, and I'm paraphrasing it right now, but I wrote, that the quote that I'm thinking about, I wish I could just read a section, but like the quote that I'm thinking about is, I said, the world needs us to see itself. It's that I felt so unneeded as an artist, but it's like anyone who's in the visual arts, especially something involving cameras, it's like we have this ability to capture the world and show it back to itself, and there's a huge honor, I think, in that, to be able to there's a huge honor in that, to be able to try to do it accurately, to really try to keep an authenticity and an intimacy with like people and humanity in general. And that's why I think the video thing quickly like died off for me, because I was like, I love it to death, and I've spent more time in cinematography than I have in photo, but immediately I was like, this isn't it. Like this isn't close enough, I don't think. And it's not close enough, actually isn't a good way to say it. It's not an authentic representation of us. It didn't feel like it the way that it was happening, and I needed more of one. But
well, I mean, really, a lot of times it's all just about a feeling, like what feels right in the moment, at the time, what feels right for the context that you're in. And I mean, that's again, that ties back to life. It ties back to what we've been talking about. It's like, what feels right at the time? What do you feel drawn to? You know, what do you need to explore? What do you need to find? Like, this is what we've been talking about for the last hour. And it's like, you know, going through the seasons, going through, you know, going through different phases. Like it's all part of it. And it's, you know, I say this all the time, but it's like, it's really about the long game. You know, I think I had a better way to say this. I had a realization a long time ago that there really is no like end goal. It's just, it's really cliche, but it's all about the journey, not the destination.
100%. And it's like, I feel like that, and that was one, you know, of many reasons I feel like I had that realization of like that I'm not one thing, is that I kept picturing, you know, getting to wherever that was, being a respected cinematographer or whatever that meant. And I started for the first time to see that there was nothing there at the end. It's like, other than pride for a bit that I did this, you know, which is a good thing, but then and then it ends, and then you need more. And for me, it's like, I want that stuff. I want to be respected. And it's like, but having this tunnel vision on this one thing, I knew it would leave me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's again, you know, it's funny that a lot of the stuff you're telling me, it seems to come back around. It's like being able to release that like stubbornness or that like tunnel vision on something. And I know what that feels like. It's like, you know, cinematography is my job, but ironically, I find it hard to create for myself through like motion or video most of the time. Most of the time I just like taking stills, and that does a lot for me. Yeah, it's wild. But I think that's like a really beautiful like way to button it up and kind of end here. That it really is about the journey, and John Mofield will continue to go on many journeys and have lots of moments of rediscovery. But thanks for doing this again, man. I think this is like a lot of what you had to say, especially about like the autographs and the collecting the signatures and the photos at the end. It's just like so beautiful and really at the heart of I think what our conversation is all about. It's like, you know, you started, you know, you moved to New York, you discovered that you really love interacting with people and creating things around people. And now to go on this whole journey, basically to what we quantify as the ends of the earth, you know, documenting people and just like interacting with them and learning their stories and learning your own story along the way. I mean, it's really poetic and beautiful and awesome. And I'm very excited when you finish this book. I need to be in like the first press run for this.
Man, absolutely.
Yeah. I'll I'll pay extra to be in the beginning. Anyway, before I let you go, where can people find you? Where can they check out your work? Like if you want to share anything that people can discover you any other way.
I think right now, so my website isn't as current, but my website's a good place that I can include. And then Instagram for photo stuff. Instagram right now is the best place. I would say Instagram is probably the best place. I'm in the process as this project becomes more solidified and actually becomes its own entity. It'll have a place to live, and the places to look for the information to find that stuff will be my Instagram and website. So
cool. Well, I'll put it in the show notes, but why don't you, if people are listening in the car or something, what's your Instagram handle and what's your website?
Instagram handle is John Mofield 30. And then my website is just johnmofield.com. And that's Mofield without the like mowing a field without the W. Mofield.
Yeah, it's one F. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, this is really great. I'm very psyched we were able to do a take two on this conversation. I feel personally it was like super fruitful.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for everything you have going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited too. Everything feels, brand new.
All right, everybody, there you have it. I loved that conversation with John. What an artist at heart. I can't wait to see what he gets up to next and what his next adventure is. I highly suggest you check out some of his work. He's a phenomenal cinematographer and photographer. In case you missed it in the interview, his website is johnmofield.com. That's Mofield with one F. And then his Instagram handle is johnmofield30. If you want to keep track of what's going on with this show, you can go to nosetpath.com or our Instagram account, which is No Set Path Podcast. Again, my name's Drew English. You can find me at drewenglish.com, or Instagram is Drew English with 2 H's. That's about it for this week. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you could give a like, a thumbs up, a 5-star review, that really helps us get this show in front of the eyes and ears of more people. The response so far, 3 episodes in, has been great, and I just can't wait to keep growing that audience and getting more guests on for you. So until next week, have a good one.